Kia ora, ko Toni Withers aho. I'm an entomologist in the Ecology and Environment group here in Scion in Rotorua. I'm presenting a talk today on not just pests, but also on the diseases of specialty wood species. And I'm speaking today on behalf of my co-authors shown here, Michael Bartlett, Roanne Sutherland and Daryl Heron. I'll be updating you on new knowledge from research undertaken at Scion on pests and diseases which impact upon tree species of interest to the Specialty Wood Products Partnership. Firstly, I'm going to introduce you to the potential threat posed by a new invasive beetle to hardwoods, especially eucalyptus. Secondly, I will talk about the threat of myrtle rust to Eucalyptus globoidea. And thirdly, the potential threat of cypress canker disease-causing pathogens Ceridium to cypresses. Firstly, the granulate ambrosia beetle, fondly known to entomologists as gab. This beetle is a scolited wood-boring beetle, Xylosandrus crassiusculus. It's a successful global invader that targets living trees and is capable of killing even entire large specimens or causing the whole branches to die back. It was first found in New Zealand infesting oak trees in an Auckland park in the summer of 2019. Its current known distribution is in West Auckland, centred on Kumeu, but no formal surveillance is occurring, so this is not likely to be an accurate map. Scion obtained permission from landholders and MPI to undertake some trials of different trapping methods between 2019 and 2021. This enables us to establish the timing and the number of generations the pest is undertaking in Auckland. One of the methods that we've illustrated here on the left was to hang freshly cut bolts of wood soaked prior in ethanol. And this is a simple way that we can look at a range of different tree species that might be attacked by gab. You can see in the graph, in the blue, Eucalyptus fastigata was attacked at a similar rate to avocado in orange, which is a known host tree of this pest overseas. But they were both attacked slightly less than Taiwan cherry, which is a known preferred host species, presented in the graph in green. This confirms eucalyptus are hosts and are vulnerable to this pest. So how much of a concern is gab for forest growers? Well, gab attacks any trees from very young to mature trees, but particularly those under physiological stress. Luckily, it's not a known pest of Pinus radiata or Douglas fir. It prefers hardwoods, especially thin-barked deciduous species, including eucalyptus, but also acacia, avocados, apples, pears, and species such as oak. It has a wide host range. We can confirm gab also infests swamp pine, Pinus aliotii, the freshly cut logs, and F2 hybrids with the tropical species Pinus caribea that were growing in Queensland. This does make us a bit nervous. We've shown that the beetles are undergoing 2 generations per annum in Auckland, and we know that trees under physiological stress, such as having disturbed roots, having recovered from drought or waterlogging, those trees give off ethanol and are then targeted by the adult female beetle who bores in, creates a gallery in which she lays her brood. We do not know how effective gab will be at vectoring pathogens when it emerges and moves from tree to tree. But few management options exist for this pest. So Scion's recommendations are that nurseries and nursery growers should be made aware that waterlogging needs to be avoided at all costs, and surveillance for these distinctive, though rather delicate and short-lived, what we call noodles in this picture. These are little extruded bits of sawdust, and they are a diagnostic symptom of gab and should be reported via finder pest. But note, they're so delicate that after heavy rain, they are washed off quite quickly. My next example covers myrtle rust and evidence for the risk that myrtle rust poses to eucalyptus. As you probably know by now, a strain of Ostropyxinia is the agent responsible for myrtle rust. When myrtle rust arrived in Australia, preliminary screening of 32 species of eucalyptus plus 9 hybrid cultivars was undertaken in the laboratory using very young plants. Seedlings were given a huge inoculum, and shown in this picture here you can see the cloud of spores. This is a higher loading than they're likely to experience in nature, but it gave the experiment confidence in the results that all trees had been exposed. So the results shown here were variable between species of eucalyptus. They range from very susceptible in species such as Eucalyptus globoidea and Teraticornis. Most species were considered to be variable. That was the majority of the rest. And there was even a few that showed full resistance, such as Eucalyptus cladocalyx. Highly susceptible native trees in Australia are being driven to local extinction, especially in areas where myrtle rust is prevalent, as the seedling recruitment fails and the trees die back from the tips. So myrtle rust, what kind of threat is it to New Zealand? Since its arrival in 2017, we have the same pandemic biotype as is present in Australia. In Australia, the known host range has doubled from 32 to 69 genera of Myrtaceae, while the most serious disease expression in New Zealand natives has so far been on Lopha myrtus. In Brazil, the impact of myrtle rust on the eucalyptus forest industry is severe. Resistant clones and species are continuously developed and redeployed in an attempt to outcompete the rust as it mutates to overcome the resistance. To date in New Zealand, there's been only one record here in the field on eucalyptus, and it's no coincidence it was on Eucalyptus globoidea. This is the same species predicted in the previous slide by the Australian laboratory trials to be highly susceptible. So what kind of risk does it pose to our eucalyptus industry? Eucalyptus globoidea is a magnificent tree. It's one of the primary species in the New Zealand Dryland Forest Initiative Tree Improvement Program. It's a durable hardwood, a white stringy bark, a monocalypt. It's a particularly exciting tree, being resistant to most insect pests in New Zealand, especially Boropsis. And it produces Class 2 durable timber with good in-ground and above-ground durability. It suits warm to cool sites and a range of soils and produces excellent growth rates with a really high mean annual increment of over 30 cubic metres per year. And it can grow 2 metres in height per annum. If you look in this picture, you'll see a little person, the measurer of this tree, being dwarfed by the just 12-year-old trees. The 2012 report from Ian Nicholas and Paul Millen highly recommended Eucalyptus globoidea as a tree for growing in the Bay of Plenty. Myrtle rust life cycle research trials were undertaken at Scion earlier this year within our pathogen containment facility room, which is a type of fog chamber. 192 seedlings of Eucalyptus globoidea were inoculated, along with control Syzygium jambos trees. Despite a very low spore germination in this particular trial, which was about 1/10 of what we were aiming for, 1/4 of all the globoidea seedlings developed symptoms. This level of inoculum is probably closer to what would be experienced in the field. So we can now confirm this is the actual damage that was produced, and the seedlings of globoidea are the most susceptible life stage. They're definitely susceptible to myrtle rust under the low inoculum loading and the high humidity that they were presented with in the laboratory. At this level, impacts in the field could be severe. The actual risk presented to globoidea plantations in the field will depend on climate and siting. You can see here in these myrtle rust maps produced by Rob Beresford from his modelling work that the drier areas that are shown in green have a significantly lower average infection risk compared to the higher risk areas that are in pink, and the maximum risk under ideal weather conditions are shown on the right in red. With these risks, you can see that Northland and the Bay of Plenty are no longer considered to be suitable for siting globoidea if it's going to be this susceptible to myrtle rust. And even some risk will remain in the Gisborne, Hawke's Bay regions when the weather is suitable for myrtle rust. So Eucalyptus globoidea perhaps needs to be a dryland species from now on to avoid the risk from myrtle rust. And families could be screened for their resistance in the future drylands breeding program if required, but siting recommendations seem the most obvious. My third topic for today is cypress canker disease in New Zealand. We have a number of cypresses in New Zealand, and they form an important specialty species for the SWP program. Canker disease is a serious dieback issue, especially for Macrocarpa and Lusitanica. It kills the trees. This disease severely limits the expansion of New Zealand's about 10,000 hectares of planted cypresses. We've been relying heavily upon breeding for resistance up till now, but still need to remain vigilant with our biosecurity awareness for any new pathogens arriving, due to having 2 native cypress species in our flora. We had previously understood that Ceridium cardinale was the primary agent for cypress canker disease, but became aware of Ceridium unicorni in the North Island also. It was uncertain which was the most pathogenic, and recent findings from a paper published in 2018 revealed numerous new species existed around the world. Our colleague Te Whauranga undertook this laboratory research and cultured and extracted DNA from 63 isolates within Scion's fungal culture collection. She analysed the BTUB region of the genome. Before 2019, we thought we had just 3 species of Ceridium, cardinale, caprese and unicorni. But now the recent research has revealed, and here's a little portion of the tree shown on the left, we've got at least 3 additional new species. Earlier work focused on resistance to a generalised cypress canker. To correctly identify the isolates identified as Ceridium, additional data is now going to be needed from additional gene regions. We need to do more work to understand the distributions and the host associations of these 3 new species, especially in light of climate change and new pathogen interactions. Industry wants to de-risk these options inherent in promoting the current resistant cultivars. So, just to recap, my conclusions from today's talk have been: granulate ambrosia beetle is here in New Zealand. It can infest eucalyptus. It's currently in Auckland, and we need to increase the awareness within tree nurseries that the importance of avoiding waterlogging and other tree stress, and to increase the surveillance for the presence of this pest. Eucalyptus globoidea is the most promising monocalypt under the tree improvement program at the Drylands Forest Initiative. Seedlings are now known to be highly susceptible to myrtle rust, and we should alter siting recommendations to only drier areas of New Zealand to offset this risk. And thirdly, we've now revealed we have at least 6 Ceridium cypress canker disease isolates, not just 3 in New Zealand. Research on pathogenicity of these to the promising cypress species and hybrids developed can be undertaken in parallel to the breeding. I've got a lot of colleagues and funding that should be acknowledged for all the aspects of this research. Thank you very much for your time today, and I'll look forward to answering some questions later.